Up next in the broadcast, North Korea fires short-range missiles into the East Sea for the second time in a week. Experts view the move as the latest objection to the ongoing South Korea-U.S. military drills. South Korea advises travelers to cancel their plans to the crisis-hit Crimea region of Ukraine as the G7 nations condemn Russia's military intervention. Maverick lawmaker An Chol-soo decides not to go it alone after all and teams up with the existing main opposition to create a new political party in time for the June elections. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening to our viewers in Korea, and hello to those of you who are watching from around the world. It's Monday, March 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin with the jolt to inter-Korean relations that kicked off the start of this week. North Korea fired 2 short-range missiles off its eastern coast on Monday morning. It's the second such launch in under a week, and South Korea's defense ministry condemned the move and said it is keeping a close watch for additional provocations. Hwang Sung-hee has our top story.
South Korea's defense ministry remains on high alert after North Korea fired what are believed to have been 2 Scud-C short-range missiles into the East Sea early Monday morning. The ministry said the missiles flew about 500 kilometers, which means they could hit targets in South Korea and Japan. The launch comes just days after the North fired 4 short-range missiles from the same location. Such launches of short-range missiles by Pyongyang are a common part of its regular military drills, but Seoul sees the latest string of launches as an intentional provocation in protest against annual joint military exercises between South Korea and the United States.
North Korea's short-range ballistic missile launch appears to be a typical two-sided tactic. The North seems to be intentionally ratcheting up tensions by firing the missiles during the key resolve exercises.
South Korea views North Korea's recent missile launches as a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, as a handful of UN sanctions ban the regime from using ballistic missile technology. Experts say launches of this sort are considered a low-degree provocation compared to last year's saber-rattling from Pyongyang, which included threats of nuclear war against Seoul and Washington. Since they come amid thawing inter-Korean ties, experts say it could be a North Korean attempt to build its ground before entering another round of negotiations with the South. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Well, North Korea and Japan's Red Cross representatives held talks in China for the first time in more than a year on this Monday.
During the first round of the meeting, the two sides agreed to continue negotiations on the possible repatriation of the remains of Japanese nationals buried in the north. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
After 6 hours of Red Cross talks in the northeastern Chinese city of Shenyang on Monday, North Korea agreed to cooperate in repatriating the remains of Japanese nationals, although more specifics were not released. The 3-day talks, the first since Prime Minister Shinzo Abe took office in late 2012, were proposed by the North. They were led by Lee Ho-rim, Secretary General of the North Red Cross Society, and Osamu Tasaka, Director General of the International Department at the Japanese Red Cross. Lee said soon after the meeting that officials from both countries need to meet regularly to discuss the repatriation issue. Top senior diplomats from both foreign ministries attended the meeting, but there's speculation that Japan wants to talk about Pyongyang repatriating Japanese abductees who are still alive in the north. The Japanese government lists 17 nationals it believes were abducted by North Korea in the 1970s and 80s. Tokyo, however, suspects Pyongyang may have kidnapped more. 5 abductees were repatriated to Japan in 2002. Japan has been requesting that North Korea reinvestigate where the abductees are. North Korea continues to urge Tokyo to compensate for the suffering of the Korean people during Japan's brutal colonization of the Korean peninsula in the early to mid-20th century.
The Japanese government will address current outstanding bilateral issues, including the abduction of Japanese nationals, and will attempt to bring a proactive attitude out of North Korea.
And what could be a first step toward resuming full-blown official discussions between North Korea and Japan? Eyes are focused on whether the Red Cross meetings will lead to formal bilateral talks between the two governments. Back in 2012, the first government-level meeting between the two countries was held in 4 years after similar Red Cross discussions. But follow-up talks were scrapped after North Korea launched a long-range rocket. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
A Christian missionary from Australia who had been detained in North Korea for around 2 weeks is a free man today.
The North's official Korean Central News Agency says the regime released 75-year-old John Short in consideration of his age and because they say he apologized for violating North Korean laws. Short left for a trip to North Korea last month and was arrested after officials found Christian pamphlets in the Korean language in his luggage. The Australian arrived at Beijing airport Monday morning and was picked up by the Australian embassy without making any public comments. And back here in the South, President Park Geun-hye says her vision of a unified Korea will go beyond overcoming division and will aim to create a new future for the peninsula, Northeast Asia, and the world.
President Park made the comments at the Asian Leadership Conference in Seoul on Monday, where she also added that there would be no fear of war or nuclear threats in a unified Korea, but rather freedom and peace for Koreans to enjoy. President Park then reaffirmed her recently announced commitment to set up a presidential preparatory committee for reunification. She also met with former U.S. President George W. Bush, who was in Seoul for Monday's conference, and thanked him for continuing his diplomatic activities to strengthen the Korea-U.S. alliance.
The foreign experts take on the latest development unfolding on the Korean peninsula. We bring into the studio Dr. Kim Taehoon, professor at Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Now, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Well, Professor, this morning's missile launches by North Korea were the second in just a week. It followed, though, some warmer relations between North Korea and South Korea, which included high-level diplomatic talks and then also the family reunions. Is North Korea being two-faced, or are they just saving face in light of our own drills with the U.S.?
Yeah, but I would argue that this is they're obviously more than saving face. Particularly this time, the firing of 4 and 2 missiles is particularly. This is obviously intentional provocation, particularly targeted at currently ongoing. Key resolve Korea-U.S. military drill.
And we know that the ongoing joint military drills between the United States and South Korea will end next month, April 18th to be exact. Will we see more of these provocations until then? And should we be worried?
Yeah, I expect there could be more provocations, but then the point here is the degree of provocation. I wouldn't say that North Korea would cross the point of no return. I mean, they might do some provocations, but then in terms of degree of provocations, that's simply sort of like a demonstration.
Well, over the weekend, President Park called on North Korea to resume family reunions on a regular basis, yet she didn't mention the missile launch from last week. Is she taking a step back from her hardline trust politic approach, or is more flexibility needed in this time of inter-Korean relations?
Well, I just would like to, if I'm not offending you, and I don't, but then I just want to rectify the term hardline trust politics, because there's no such a thing like a hardline trust politics by itself. I mean, trust politics notion, the policy notion of trust politics is very flexible. To put it precisely, on the one hand, we will be very determined and firm on North Korean provocations. Okay?
So this doesn't count as a provocation then?
No.
But then some people are actually saying it is a provocation. So which one is it?
The North Korean?
These recent missile launches, are they provocations?
This is intended provocation. Intended provocation. So, I mean, from my perspective, this is obviously a provocation, but the point is that I'm not surprised at all.
What we are also seeing is a series of North Korean efforts to break international isolation. Of course, we have seen the release of an Australian missionary and also engaging in Red Cross talks with Japan. What do you make of these moves? And will this somehow bring about positive effects in the inter-Korean relations?
Yes, yeah. Well, I definitely hear optimistic. Of course, I mean, given again here, based on my understanding of North Korean grand strategy of dual track approach. The North Korean Supreme Leader Mr. Kim Jong-un, he has put great emphasis on economic reconstruction in general, which means that they need some like a hard currency, economic collaboration, economic cooperation, particularly with the South Korea. So, given that I would argue economic imperative, I think we could be quite cautiously, however cautiously it might be, optimistic about North-South Korea relationship and North Korea trying to be out of like isolation.
All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang's Sean Lim and Yoo Ji-hye from the heart of Seoul. Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
A dramatic change in the political landscape seems inevitable as the leaders of Korea's two opposition parties announced plans over the weekend to launch a new coalition party that will be up and running ahead of local elections in June. Our Park Ji-won has this report.
Following the surprise merger plan announced by the two leaders of main opposition blocs, Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo of the New Political Vision Party will start touring the nation from Wednesday to prepare the groundwork for the new party. Both agreed to complete necessary procedures of forming the new party before the June local elections by jointly setting up a preparatory committee comprised of 5 members from each party.
Both parties aim to push ahead for the creation of the new united party as soon as possible and to achieve a transfer of power in the presidential election in 2017.
They said the new party will not nominate candidates for local council and ward elections in the upcoming June elections, such as municipal council elections and local district council elections. The major party's nomination for local council member elections has long been considered a source of corruption and bribes.
We decided not to nominate candidates for local wards and local council member elections in the June elections. This decision has been made after pondering what choices would be necessary to achieve the transfer of government in 2017.
The new party will focus on the livelihoods of the people and on establishing a fairer economic system, along with a focus on launching further investigations into the spy agencies meddling in the 2012 presidential election. However, political insiders say they expect some friction during the merger process. The announcement of the coalition came as a big surprise, especially considering An Chol-soo declared just a matter of weeks ago that he would launch his own new political party. An says he felt reassured about the merger plan when the DP decided to give up the controversial nomination system. The DP convened a general meeting of its assembly members on Monday to discuss future direction of the coalition. The ruling Missionary Party denounced the merger, calling it collusion that is purely aimed at short-term political gain at the June elections. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Tens of thousands of medical doctors here in Korea have announced that they will stage a one-day strike next Monday and then a 6-day-long protest starting March 24th. The government, however, says it won't just idly sit by and let a medical crisis unfold. Our Yu Lian reports on what's ahead.
With an overwhelming yes vote of almost 80%, the Korea Medical Association has decided to go ahead with a nationwide walkout from March 10th. The protest is the first in 14 years, and given that over half of all practicing doctors nationwide participated in the vote, it could potentially deal a huge blow to the medical industry and to patients in need of medical services. Doctors in Korea are furious about a government plan announced late last year to introduce telemedicine in for-profit hospital subsidiaries. They're concerned such measures lay the groundwork for privatizing medical services.
Doctors are feeling extremely desperate given the reality they are facing. So many will voluntarily take part in this strike.
The Ministry of Health and Welfare is trying to reassure the public that the strike will not lead to that much inconvenience, given that they expect the participation rate to only be in the 20 to 30% range. The government has also vowed to take legal measures against those who take part in the strike.
We'll first order the hospitals to resume operations. If it does not do so, it will be suspended from all business operations for 15 days.
Both the ruling and opposition parties have slammed the decision, calling on the Medical Association to call off the walkout for the sake of patients' health. But since both the government and the Medical Association are refusing to back down, not many are holding much hope for a compromise anytime soon. Yurian, Arirang News.
A red alert in Ukraine as tensions remain sky high over Russia's perceived power grab for the nation.
The current crisis has led the group of 7 nations to condemn Russia for invading Ukraine and to cancel preparations for an upcoming G8 summit. Shin Se-min has the details.
The international community is stepping up pressure on Russia to pull its troops out of Ukraine, but Crimean Peninsula remains under the control of Russian soldiers. The group of 7 major industrialized nations on Sunday condemned Moscow's invasion of Ukraine and even canceled preparations for an upcoming G8 summit scheduled to take place in Sochi in June. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who will arrive in Kiev on Tuesday, has condemned Russia for what he called an incredible act of aggression and warned that the country has a lot to lose if it presses on with its current course of action. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, Kerry sent a stronger message saying there could ultimately be asset freezes, visa bans, and implications on trade. The U.S. Congress has already called for sanctions against Russia. Russia's parliament has already given the green light to its President Vladimir Putin to use military force to protect its citizens in Ukraine, defying calls from the international community not to intervene. Over the weekend, Ukraine mobilized its military for a possible confrontation with Russia, which had previously dispatched more than 6,000 troops to Crimea. Some even surrounded several small Ukrainian military outposts, demanding forces there to disarm. On Sunday, Ukraine's Navy chief defected to Russia after having been appointed just a day before. Russia has also been staging military exercises involving 150,000 troops along its border with Ukraine. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And for more global news updates from the annual meeting of China's parliament to the winners at the Academy Awards, we turn things over to our Polly standing by at the News Center.
So, Paul, let's start with the latest out of Beijing.
Well, China's top political body opened its 9-day session in the Great Hall of the People on Monday. Top party and state leaders were in attendance, including President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang. The 2,200 deputies attending the annual session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference will discuss major issues concerning the country's development. Some of the other main topics on the agenda include China's economic growth forecast, foreign relations, reform policies, and tackling chronic pollution. The event, however, has been overshadowed by a deadly knife attack at a train station in the southwestern Chinese city of Kunming. Staying in China, authorities there are continuing their investigation into the Kunming knife attack that killed at least 29 people and injured over 130 others this past weekend. 2 days after the attack, security remains tight around the train station in southwestern China. Xinhua news agency says police shot 4 of the attackers dead and captured 1, but about 5 others are still on the run. Beijing has blamed the attack on Uyghur Muslim separatists from Xinjiang in China's far west. China's domestic security chief has vowed all-out efforts to bring those responsible to justice.
Well, Paul, let's shift things over to California in the United States. Hollywood is abuzz right now with a sea of the film industry's top stars celebrating this year's Oscar winners. Tell us about some of the highlights from Sunday's awards ceremony.
Well, the 86 Academy Awards wrapped up with this year's host Ellen DeGeneres making a huge splash. She was able to work the whole room with her witty zingers and even took the time to break the world record for the most retweeted photograph in history with a picture featuring A-list celebrities. Among tonight's big winners include the historical drama 12 Years a Slave, which won Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay. The film is an adaptation of the 1853 memoir by Solomon Northup, who was kidnapped and sold into slavery. Meanwhile, the space drama Gravity stole the night with 7 Oscars. Mexican director Alfonso Cuarón got the nod for Best Director for Gravity, making him the first Latin American to win the award. And Matthew McConaughey won Best Actor for his performance in Dallas Buyers Club. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines. I'll see you back here again tomorrow night.
All of last week, we had higher than seasonal average temperatures, but it came with high levels of fine dust.
That's right. And now I hear spring rain is on its way. For more, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Good evening, guys. Well, spring rain is forecast in the southern regions from tomorrow through Wednesday, which will begin in Jeju. After this round of rain, numbers will take a dip through the latter half of the week. But through mid-March, the weather looks to be clear and dry. However, towards the end of this month, the southern regions will get a lot of rain. Taking a look at the current conditions, well, we're currently seeing clear skies due to a high pressure system, but things are looking quite different for tomorrow. Jeju will get 5 to 30 millimeters of precipitation and other parts of the southern regions 5 to 10 millimeters. And similar to today, daytime highs will peak from between 10 to 13 degrees, so please continue to be aware of the big temperature gap between the day and night. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at 0 degrees with a high of 11. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan reach 12. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju make it to the low teens, while Dokdo tops out at 7. Well, that's all the weather update for Korea, and I'll see you again after midnight.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Now starting with golf, let's go to the PGA. An unlikely winner emerged from the PGA National in Palm Beach, Florida to take home the Honda Classic trophy. That's 24-year-old Russell Hanley. He joined Rory McIlroy, Russell Knox, and Ryan Palmer for a 4-man playoff after they all ended regulation at 8 under. And replaying the 18th hole, McIlroy, Knox, and Palmer all parred, while Hanley two-putted his way to a birdie and his second PGA Tour win. McIlroy had led for most of the tournament before melting down in the final round, where he scored 5 bogeys and a double bogey. Meanwhile, Tiger Woods withdrew after the 13th hole due to back spasms, which have been bothering him as of late. Now it's the LPGA. American Paula Creamer got her first win in over 3.5 years in a dramatic finish. On the second playoff hole against Azara Munoz, she was 75 feet from the hole and facing a birdie to tie. And expecting a 2-putt, she took her stroke, but miraculously, it was a perfect hit with a ball homing into the cup. Afterwards, Creamer called her 10th career win one of her favorites. Well, her championship putt will definitely be one of history's favorites as well. And coming back to the country, South Korea's Sochi Olympics medalists were presented with their prize money in a ceremony at Seoul's Taeneung skating rink. The location was fitting as all of Team Korea's medals, 3 golds, 3 silvers, and 2 bronzes, came from skating. Short tracker Hwang Sung-hee earned the most with over $58,000 for her 1,000-meter and 3,000-meter relay golds and 500-meter bronze. And heading to Major League Baseball, a piece of baseball history will be written in Monday's preseason game between the Milwaukee Brewers and Chicago Cubs. The expanded replay rules will go into effect for the first time, widening the scope of which plays can be reviewed, from just home runs to base running, fan interference, and ground rule double calls, amongst others. Now, managers will also be allowed one challenge per game, and one more if they get the first one right. And ending off with football in England, Manchester City defeated Sunderland 3-1 in the Capital One Cup finals. Sunderland scored in the first 10 minutes of the match, putting the Sky Blues on edge. But it was in the 54th minute that Yaya Touré's long-range shot put the scores level before a little over a minute later, Samir Nasri put Man City over the top. They added one more in stoppage time before taking the match and hoisting the League Cup trophy. And that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here at midnight for more from the world of sports.
Right, thanks, Stephen. And that's a broadcast on this Monday night. I'm Yuti Hain, Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.